Half-Life 2 is one of the best VR games of all time, which is ironic since it's not a VR game and by the time November rolls around, it'll be old enough to buy you a drink. I'll start by stating the obvious here, it didn't start as a VR game, but a few years ago some very talented modders managed to transform a 2-decade-old, frenetic first-person shooter into a seamless VR experience. I completed Half-Life 2 for the first time in VR, back when this mod was first published on Steam, and I've been itching for an excuse to play through it again ever since. After playing Portal 2 in VR, I found myself in the mood for more Valve shenanigans, so I asked myself, can you beat Half-Life 2 in VR without hurting a headcrab? Half-Life 2's intro is iconic. Really, the whole game is, but there's nothing I can say about it that hasn't been said 1,000 times before more eloquently by smarter people. So I'll stick to the VR side of things for now. Since I completed Half-Life Alyx before any other entry in the franchise, a lot of Half-Life 2's iconography was familiar to me in a twisted, reverse nostalgic way. I recognize things like Combine checkpoints and references to Nova Prospekt, but I'm used to the slower-paced, tighter side of City 17 shown in Alyx. Speaking of Alyx, having missed out on the early aughts obsession with our Blasian queen, playing through Half-Life 2 as a mute, after spending untold hours listening to Alyx's voice in my head, took some getting used to. I still had a lot of intro to go before meeting Alyx, so I armed myself with a makeshift shiv and moved on. Half-Life 2's intro is like a diesel engine. It takes a while to get going, building up an impending sense of dread with its long queues and Eastern European occupants with suspiciously American accents.
You'll have to wait your turn like everybody else. You've gotta be damn hungry to wait in line for this crap.
To remind myself that our true enemy is instinct.
But once you're out on the streets, things escalate quite quickly.
For giving us respite. This overpowering force. They have thrown a switch and exercised our ability.
I mistook a regular city scanner for Russell's drone and it flashed me, before leading me to a creepy playground. It's interesting to see how well the set pieces and props that were meant to show off the Source engine's physics translate to VR interactivity. At times, it feels like the intro was made with VR in mind, with lots of moving pieces that play with scale and a potential fear of heights. It wasn't long until I met my beautiful Nubian queen that I also used to be. While the Combine tried their hardest to disrupt Alyx and I's meet cute, she seemed just as happy to meet me as I was her.
Nice to finally meet you.
Unfortunately for Alyx, she was quickly forgotten when I encountered the first headcrab of Half-Life 2. I then slipped into Gordon's iconic HEV suit, admired my new hand drip, and saw a familiar face. I was happy to see Eli alive and well, but I was a little less pleased with his shoddy teleportation technology. Lamar and I were given a healthy dose of epilepsy juice before I was teleported outside the safety of the lab and handed a boring, not at all iconic piece of painted metal. Using Gordon's crowbar in VR feels really good, at times better than melee weapons in actual VR games. Still, Valve knew what they were doing keeping melee out of Half-Life Alyx. Combat with the crowbar felt a little ineffective, but I didn't have to rely on it for long before I got my hands on the first gun of the run. This mod includes laser sights from the RIP, fully interactive reloads, and the ability to chamber one round at a time. I debated disabling the laser sight for the sake of this video, but I soon realized it was an essential tool for telling friend from foe. Not to mention, long-range firefights were a bit hard to follow on a flat screen, since the VR mirror rarely caught the actual hollow sight when I aimed. The rest of this section consisted mostly of straightforward wave shooting, interrupted occasionally by unintended jump scares.
Jesus.
With this conversion, the shooting feels great, and the occasional physics puzzles translate well into VR. Before you get your hands on the gravity gun, you can interact with most physics objects like you would in Half-Life Alyx. Speaking of Alyx, it wasn't long until I was introduced to a familiar yet comparatively more intimidating enemy. Fighting manhacks with the crowbar feels really good in VR. So good that I kinda wish a talented modder with too much time on their hands would set up a Beat Saber minigame in Source and replace the blocks with those spiky bastards. As I continued through City 17's surprisingly robust sewer system, I began to understand Kanye's disdain for the paparazzi, with their flashing lights, and found a manhack pinned underwater. After putting the little guy out of his misery, drowning's no way for a warrior to go, I heard a simultaneously wonderful and worrisome call. Now's a good time to dissect the premise for this video. It's similarly worded as my very first challenge video for a reason. First off, I'm still not sure if putting the word kill in a video's title will limit its reach. Secondly, there are a lot of instances in this game where immortal NPCs that don't share my love for headcrabs interact with headcrabs. I don't believe in forcing your world views on those around you, but I do believe in living by example. For this video, I challenge myself not to hurt or kill any headcrabs, but that love does not extend to the nasty bastards that they occasionally find themselves on. In my mind, shooting a zombie out from under a headcrab is a mercy to all parties involved, and headcrabs are typically grateful for the intervention. After a brief reunion with my heady hermanos, I met a woman who really knew how to crank that shit, and started one of the more controversial sections of this port. The airboat sections in VR can be a bit much for gamers prone to motion sickness, and I'd encourage anyone avoiding this mod because of them to simply skip them with console commands. Throughout Half-Life 2's root canal levels, you're more likely to see G-Man's bitch ass than you are to run across a headcrab. Besides the occasional sideshow with barrel dodging minigames and physics puzzles meant to replenish your supplies, Root Canal is a relatively simple section of an otherwise complex campaign. You might encounter the occasional puzzle or vehicular homicide in your journey, but the real excitement comes from interacting with Valve's glass physics that clearly paved the way for Source 2's implementation. After engaging in extremely advanced barrel stealth warfare, I encountered the first Combine health station of the game. The squashed grub was dearly missed. I had to use every wrinkle in my brain to get a valve working, and discovered that turret sections were actually a little more tolerable when you used both hands in VR. After dodging a rocket, committing a tiny bit more vehicular manslaughter, and encountering an especially slow comm boner, I got my grubby mitts on my favorite weapon in the game. The VR mod devs did my boy right, and I couldn't be more grateful. After grabbing the revolver, the next chunk of Root Canal was just more shooting and looting and panicking when I pulled out the wrong gun. The game must have detected my waning interest, because it sent a fuck-ass helicopter my way to spice things up. If there was one positive aspect of these airboat sections, it's how cinematic racing through the canals with the whole world out to get you feels. Of course, just as I went to compliment the game, it decided to trap me under a metric ton of brick. After meeting a scrappy squad of resistance fighters, a filthy Vortigaunt partially redeemed his species by equipping my airboat with a kick-ass gun. If there was one reason to risk motion sickness with these sections, it's mowing down every living thing you see with this gun. Since the boat, your head, and the gun all move independently of one another, it feels a lot more complex and engaging than it looks on a flat screen. The game reminded me of the premise of my challenge when it bombarded me with a herd of headcrabs, and I dispatched the helicopter with relative ease. After dunking on 2 more comboners, I saw something out of the corner of my eye and made a mental note to go back to this section of the recording and enhance that sucker. You can see me questioning my sanity in this clip, before questioning my reality in the next. And just like that, I completed the objectively worst section of the game. Moving on, I met one of the top 5 MILFs in all of gaming, pressed a few buttons, and pressed a few buttons, and pressed a few buttons. I met Eli Vance face to face, pressed a few buttons, and pressed a few buttons. Eli pulled me from my trance with an iconic line.
There's nothing Gordon can't handle, with the possible exception of you.
Dad, please.
And Alyx and I decided to go have some fun. I was hit over the head with incredibly subtle foreshadowing.
That's the old passage to Ravenholm. We don't go there anymore.
And got my hands on a gaming icon. The gravity gun feels natural in VR, due in no small part to the fact that most VR games already implement some form of telekinesis for our lower back's sake. Using the gravity gun feels like hopping on a bike after years of riding a scooter. After I hit a gnarly clip, shit hit the fan. And Alyx and I were warned by Eli not to go to Ravenholm. We went to Ravenholm. Well, actually, I went to Ravenholm, but I like to think I keep a small part of Alyx in my heart wherever I go. Ravenholm is very scary on the flat screen, and even more so in VR. Lucky for me, Headcrabs were finally starting to sense my good intentions and began to let me pass in peace. Now's as good a time as any to address something I touched on 5 years ago? Good googly moogly, I'm getting old. Anyways, in my mind, every Headcrab zombie represents a Schrodinger's cat situation. Sometimes you kill the zombie underneath and a Headcrab pops off, sometimes they don't. Either way, I assume they're alive and well and keep on keeping on. If they do pop off their zombie's noggin, that just means I get one more friend to join me in my journey. This next section pushed my patience to the limits, due in no small part to the growing horde of Headcrabs and Headcrab zombies my pacifistic tendencies encouraged. What really pissed me off though was this vent tucked away in a corner. I tried to stack physics props to climb up to it multiple times, with varied results, just to realize it was nothing more than an alternate route through the level. Each new room in Ravenholm provided a new obstacle to the challenge. I had to move an explosive barrel before a zombie slapped it around, dodge sneaky little poison sluts, and generally avoid getting cornered by Ravenholm's denizens. I met Father Grigori, a holy man who did not share my love for Headcrabs, and encountered the first Headcrab variant that is not featured in Half-Life Alyx. Fast Headcrabs are actually kinda scary in VR, mostly because they were designed with a snappy mouse and keyboard in mind. Compared to the rest of the Headcrab variants, they give little warning before jumping, and it takes considerable self-control not to take care of them the way Gaben intended. Logically, the zombies these Headcrabs control are equally frightening in VR. Normal Headcrabs are slow and tame by comparison, which further proves how misunderstood they are. I was given a shotgun by Father Grigori, which was exciting in and of itself, but I was even more pleased to discover a new form of VR interaction. In the original flat-screen version of Half-Life 2, you can block Headcrabs with physics objects, but it never felt as intuitive in VR as simply blocking them with your hands. It took until Ravenholm for me to attempt to block Headcrabs with a gun, and I was thrilled to find a new way to train the more unruly Headcrabs. Speaking of unruly Headcrabs, now's as good a time as any to point out that poisonous Headcrabs are just as disgusting in Half-Life 2 as they are in Alyx. Seriously, I cannot stress how often poison Headcrabs made me reconsider this challenge. Not because avoiding them is difficult, but because I hate them. Fortunately, I neared the end of Ravenholm, only having to deal with a few more waves of fast zombies and Headcrabs before Father Grigori led me to hallowed ground.
For this is hallowed ground.
Despite finding the Father's lines entertaining, I did have a bit of beef with him. Luckily, when I killed zombies with props, their Headcrabs rarely seemed to pop off, which saved them from the Father's holy lead. Father Grigori and I parted ways. For this next clip, I'll give you guys a taste of the nasty noises that come out of my mouth when recording these challenges. After one last stretch of headcrab-infested mines, I surfaced in a sniper-infested section of City 17. Valve does a good job of encouraging the player to experiment with their full arsenal, and I found the gravity gun grenade combo especially satisfying. I encountered a small group of rebels harboring a filthy vort, left a personalized present that they did not seem to care for, and was presented with the second vehicle of the game. In my opinion, the buggy is much more enjoyable than the airboat. It doesn't feel as floaty, and I prefer navigating the open coast more than the cramped canals. Plus, the antlions introduced in this section are a lot more lively than their Alyxian counterparts. During a brief detour from the buggy, I encountered another band of renegade Webbles deliberating over who should get a rocket launcher. I was like super nonchalant, and I think they low-key picked up on that vibe, no skizzy, cause they handed it over to me and I handled it with the utmost care. Further down the coast, I was able to live out a childhood dream of operating expensive, heavy equipment. I was momentarily disappointed with a rare lack of physical interactions in a Source game. Ramping off this Combine shuttle would have been badass, but I soon had bigger fish to fry. When you're in the heat of the moment, you can easily tune out just how loud games can get. The buggy's engine sounded like less of a purr and more like a chainsaw in my skull, so I took a moment to lower the volume. Ironically, the next stretch of road provided a quieter, stealthier section with the closest thing to a sniper in Half-Life 2, the crossbow. This section lulled me in with a false sense of security, only to surprise me with this guy. And I made my way to one of the most iconic levels in an iconic franchise. You really feel the sense of scale when you make your way under this bridge, and the occasional slip made my cheeks flex harder than an Edgar does flirting with a hyena. I had an embarrassing moment that reminded me of those old Windex commercials and ran out of rockets at a rather inopportune time. I booked it back to a spare rocket I saw, downed the enemy's gunship in one shot, which meant I ran all that way for a single rocket, and remembered the bastard I left behind at the beginning of this section. I let the warring bug tribe sort themselves out and used a long-range weapon up close and a close-range weapon for a long-ranged fight. Just when I thought shit was sweet, a train came barreling out of the coastal mist and made me pucker for the second time in half an hour. The little time I had left with the buggy was relatively boring. I had to navigate a spooky tunnel, accidentally equipped a rocket launcher in lieu of my gravity gun, and left my buggy behind to set out on foot. Through expert detective skills, I deducted that standing on the sand made the antlions go crazy.
Don't step on the sand, it makes the antlions crazy!
To avoid detection, I hopped from junk to junk, and when that failed, I shot the headlines until they started lying on the beach. An antlion queen did not appreciate my jokes, so I shot her, and took her pheromones for myself. In classic Valve fashion, controlling the antlions with these little pheromone grenades twisted an existing game mechanic into a new, more exciting interaction. From this point on, I was able to sick a personal army of antlions on my foes. They would occasionally step in front of my bullets, but these things happen in a monarchy. Instead of a guillotine, my subjects found other ways to rebel against my rule. The most annoying thing they did was block my rocket launcher, sometimes on accident and sometimes seemingly on purpose. I totally didn't die to the first headcrab I encountered since the bridge, and made an oopsie on instinct. Before I loaded a previous save to bring a fast headcrab back to life, I let his brother give me my just desserts. The game wasn't done punishing me for that slip-up. It hit me with a dual jump scare before allowing me to unleash my horde on my foes. The rest of the upper layers of Nova Prospekt were pretty uninteresting, at least as far as this challenge is concerned. It took me quite a bit of shooting, looting, and scooting before I saw my next headcrab. It almost burned its little feetsies when it lunged at me, so I led it to a safer shore before moving deeper into Nova Prospect. In Nova Prospect's lower levels, I met up with Alyx and got a little too excited when I saw her use her multi-tool. I also got scolded for watching her shoot a familiar pistol.
Cover me!
I never got the chance to pay her back before she rushed to her father's aid and found a horde of Combine soldiers blocking her path. After not breaking a single pane of glass to save her father, I opted not to enter a room full of speedy boys and drank a can of IPD adjustment juice. What should have been a simple trip through 2 small stretches of vents ended up being the second most frustrating section of this playthrough. The first 2 headcrabs that blocked my way were easy enough to deal with. I simply led them out of the vent and hurried past. It was their solitary cousin in the next vent that really threw me for a loop. The vent was too cramped for me to crawl past the little guy, and the VR mod decided to throw a wrench in my plans at the absolute worst time. It might be hard to tell what's happening in this clip, but for whatever reason, switching to any weapon in my arsenal caused my hand to teleport 2 feet to my right and get stuck on the outside of the vent. I cut the footage down for the sake of this video, but I had to twist and turn 50 different ways to finally get a gun in my hands and shoot the far vent open. My biggest mistake in this whole interaction was thinking I shot the headcrab when I did not. Watching the footage back now, I know better, but in the moment, the integrity of the run demanded that I load a previous save. Another 5 or so minutes of me trying to get my weapon within the confines of the vent passed before I managed to switch to the gravity gun, only for this to happen. Again, for the sake of this video, I won't show my subsequent struggles, but just know it took me 3 more attempts that spanned close to half an hour to open the vent and trigger the mine underneath without killing the headcrabs in the room beyond my vent mate. Full disclosure, I was so flustered that I forgot to clip this successful attempt. So if you really want to call this challenge a failure, feel free to, but just know I suffered for your entertainment. To add shit icing to that shit cake, the fast headcrabs that followed me had a habit of getting between me and soldiers and 2 Combine turrets, and when my sweaty fingers accidentally dropped a grenade at my feet, one of the headcrabs pulled a Steve Rogers and made me start all over again. After a few more failures that spiked my blood pressure to biblical levels, I tried and failed to sneak past some sleepy zombies. Alyx strolling in after I fought off waves of Combine soldiers and after that headcrab madness almost negatively affected my opinion of her. Lucky for her, I was distracted by a strong jawline and mommy milkers and forgot why I was upset. Gordon being mute had a tendency to bite him and by extension me in the ass. Dr. Milfy stole Eli away from Alyx and I. And when we went to use the Combine's inferior recreation of Eli's teleporter, we ended up in an alternate universe where Dr. Kleiner kept that thing on him and Lamar had the ability to teleport. After the frustrations I had faced, it was nice to have a quiet moment with Dog and positive affirmations from Alyx.
Gordon, take care of yourself out there.
Watching Dog kick Combine ass started to raise my spirits. Seeing him in action made me realize how appropriate his name was. Dog had that dog in him. When we parted ways, spooky music led me to a television set featuring that one guy from Gary's mod. Moving on, I ran into rebel soldiers willing to watch my back, though their tendency to step in front of my rocket launcher made me wish they hadn't bothered. To make matters worse, 2 medics healed me so well that they crashed my game.
Take this med. Take this med.
I pulled a page out of Bugs Bunny's book with an oblivious Combine soldier, died, and ran into a fast headcrab with the survival instincts of a 3-toed sloth. Ironically, after fumbling with my cluttered Alyx-esque weapon wheel, I ran into another fast headcrab with a vastly superior sense of self-preservation. The game's frantic pace was starting to get to me. The weapon wheel wasn't made for swift switches to and from the gravity gun, arguably the only downside compared to the flat screen version, and it made chaotic fights all the more, well, chaotic. The chaos continued when 50 bajillion manhacks jumped me in a back alley, and a poisonous headcrab appeared to make my worsening headache worse. Even more Bugs Bunny hijinks ensued, a Combine soldier pulled a Judas, and I blew off some steam with a Combine hopper and an innocent bystander. Seeing as I never beat Half-Life 2 on the flat screen, I can't speak to how intense these Combine sniper sections are with a mouse and keyboard. I will say it feels like they were designed for VR from the rip, encouraging you to dodge incoming fire by scrambling from cover to cover. It's almost a shame when you enter buildings with more cover available and more targets to distract them. Since NPCs have a mind of their own and a tendency to shoot headcrabs, I didn't spare more than a darn when the medic that had hung onto my coattails bit the dust. Dealing with the rest of the snipers was relatively simple. I had to balance dodging headcrabs and not avoiding the sniper's sightlines long enough for them to target my children. The only real annoyance with this section was Barney's sass and less enlightened view of headcrabs. He hated them so much that he risked blowing the both of us to Kingdom Come to kill an admittedly unlikable poison headcrab. From this point on, headcrab encounters were incredibly sparse. For a normal playthrough, this section's gameplay is a blast. Valve did an excellent job making you feel like an unlikely leader in an overmatched and overwhelmed rebellion. But for the purposes of this challenge, the only footage worth showing is this clip of Barney's snarky attitude. And my continued struggle with NPCs blocking my rockets. As the rebels and I pushed further into the city, I unfortunately encountered the most frustrating section of this playthrough. I say unfortunately because in a normal playthrough, fighting through these ruins flows naturally and makes you feel like you're a one-man army. Sadly, for whatever reason, a scripted set piece did not play out, locking me out of the rest of the game. It had been long enough since my last playthrough that I did not remember the exact sequence of events that should have played out, so I spent an inordinate amount of time searching every nook and cranny for a hint as to where I should go next. Valve is typically great about leading the player without obnoxious environmental context clues, so I assumed I was missing something obvious and searched for a long time before resorting to pulling up a walkthrough. It's hard to see in the footage within footage shown here, but normally a Strider circles this arena. It blows this section of wall open and allows Gordon to move on. Unfortunately, this did not happen in my playthrough, and the game ground to a halt. I hadn't saved in a long time because I completed the walkthrough for this challenge in 2 sittings. Because of that, I only had 2 autosaves that took me to the beginning of this fight. Here's where challenge run rules can get a bit iffy. I make these challenges because I enjoy playing the games featured in them. If or when I run into an obstacle, I try every workaround possible, both intended and unintended. But if I'm locked out of progression due to a scripting error or a game bug, I have no qualms with cheating for the sake of progression. In this case, I used NoClip to move to the next portion of this fight. If you've ever played a Bethesda or Valve game in VR, you can imagine how much of a momentum killer this section ended up becoming. I had to peek through my nose gap, enable console commands, remember the right command to enable cheats, NoClip, disable cheats, search high and low for the missing Strider which somehow got its gangly ass stuck in this tiny tunnel, try to kill it and see if that fixed the section, died while doing so, tried to continue normally, ran into another scripting issue that locked me out with an invisible wall, and repeated that whole song and dance to skip to the next set piece. For a painfully brief moment, my reunion with Barney and Dog fooled me into believing that the scripting had finally sorted itself out. It didn't. Dog beat on his chest like a frat boy hopped up on Mike's Hard Lemonade trying to intimidate a cop, while Barney and I suffered in silence. Thankfully, one last NoClip was all it took to put that whole broken mess behind me. Ironically, just a few moments later, I ran into the last headcrab of the run. I didn't dawdle for too long. The last thing I wanted to do was bait him into jumping to his doom, but it didn't feel right to part ways without one last goodbye. Normally, I end these videos with a concrete conclusion, answering the question I pose in the title. Capping this challenge off wasn't so simple. I think I proved that yes, you can beat Half-Life 2 without hurting a headcrab yourself, but the existence of immortal, friendly NPCs with a tendency to kill every headcrab they see simultaneously leads to a no. You can't beat Half-Life 2 without a headcrab being hurt. The answer to the titular question boils down to interpretation. Some people believe standing aside and allowing atrocities to be committed makes you culpable in their existence. Others could stand by the lever in the trolley dilemma and not even think about touching it. When I first launched OBS, Voice Attack, Steam VR, and Half-Life 2 for this challenge, the last thing I expected to end with was a philosophical dilemma. Of course, life doesn't always play out the way you plan, and sometimes you just gotta go with the flow. Thanks for watching this video. If you stuck around till the end, do me a favor and post your favorite philosophical quote in the comments. It helps with the algorithm, but more importantly, it gives me something to read while I poop.
Come on, Gordon. We've got to get out of here. Maybe we still have...
The rest of this... What am I, fucking 14? That clearly paved the way for... Oh my god. I had an embarrassing moment that reminded me of those old Winder? Oh.
Lamar! Blast that little... Where did she get to?